Good morning, students. Welcome back to the session. I hope I'm audible. Am I audible, students? Okay, thank you. Right, so in the last session, we discussed about the concepts of compiler, basically some introductory concepts regarding how exactly compilers are developed and how compilers are actually used in various applications. So we saw that compiler technology is used in various applications like in development of computer architecture or in coming up with new programming languages in different types of translations like binary translation or hardware synthesis, right? And it is also responsible for some of the new concepts that have emerged in high-level programming languages, right? So these are some of the applications of compiler technology. We had also seen in the last session the tools that are actually used in compilers or in the compiler construction to be precise. They are nothing but the parser generator, the scanner generator, right? And we also had code optimizers, right? So you can observe here, these are all some of the compiler construction tools. So we have parser generator, we have scanner generator, we have syntax directed translation engines, and we also have code generator generators and data flow analysis engines. So all of these are some of the specific tools that can be used to develop a particular phase of a compiler. We also have a compiler construction toolkit itself, which will help us to develop all the phases of compiler in a single integrated environment. Okay. So these are all some of the things that we had already discussed about. We also discussed about the evolution of programming language, where we discussed about how exactly new languages emerged because of necessity, from binary language to assembly level language, from assembly level language to high level language. And we also saw how we can classify different types of languages when we come across languages like C, C++, we are calling it as imperative languages because in that particular language we are supposed to tell how things has to be done. And we had other category which is declarative language, in which we just specify what has to be done and the rest of the things are taken care by the programming language itself. That is one such category. And the second category is in terms of generation, right? So we have from first to fifth generation different programming languages. Okay, so from first generation, like starting from binary language to fifth generation, right? So where I believe there is a programming language called as Prolog and OP5. So all of these things are around comes under the fifth generation. We also classify languages as von Neumann language, object-oriented language, and scripting language also. Okay, so we have seen different varieties of languages there under these categories as well. So one point to take away here is that the compiler technology has greater impact on the high-level language or the language that it basically translates. So that is one thing that we need to look for. Uh, when we discuss about the science of building a compiler, we discussed about what models are supposed to be used and why optimization becomes essential. So models that are used are finite state machines, regular expressions, context-free grammars. And when we perform optimization, we do it with the following design objectives, which are as follows. It should be correct. It should be improving the performance of the program. It must be taking a reasonable amount of time, and the effort that is required must be minimum, right? So all of these things are to be considered when we perform optimizations using compiler, right? So we also discussed about applications at the end. So these are some of the things that are related with the compiler technology. Now we are supposed to look into how our compiler is actually constructed or how exactly our compiler works. So we will now start with our first phase of the compiler, which is basically called as the lexical analysis. Okay, so I've already mentioned about what is lexical analysis. So lexical analysis is basically scanning the input to identify tokens and return them back to the next phase of the compiler, which is our syntax analyzer. So we have got dedicated tools for generating lexical analysis, which we are already familiar with. One of the tool that is used is Lex, of course, which we are using in Windows, which is called as Flex, is also a variation of the same. So what exactly this lexical analyzer does? So how exactly it identifies tokens and how we can program a lex. That is what we are supposed to look into in this particular chapter. Okay. So first we shall look into what is the role of lexical analyzer. So let us see. So as I said, the main task of the lexical analyzer is to read the input characters of the source program. So this is the first task. So it has to read the input characters and then it has to group the lexemes together, or it has to group them into lexemes and produce as output a sequence of tokens, okay, for each lexeme in the source program. So this is basically the task of the lexical analyzer, right? So what is the major task? First it has to scan the source program, then it has to group characters together to make up a lexeme, okay, and then produce a corresponding token for that particular lexeme which it has identified. Of course, there are certain terminologies that we need to look into, which are lexeme, by the way. Of course, a token, I already told you that it's a output that is produced by the lexical analyzer. What is a lexeme? We shall look into that later. Okay. So once the stream of token is produced, that will be passed on to the next phase of the compiler, which is our syntax analyzer. Now, normally, when the lexer scans the input, so it also will do one extra thing, which is to enter that particular lexeme which is had identified into the symbol table. So obviously, this information is going to be used up by the remaining phases of the compiler as well. So majority task is to identify token and return it to the syntax analyzer, and side task is to enter those values, whatever it has identified, into the symbol table. So this is what the lexical analyzer actually does. Okay. Now the interaction between the lexical analyzer and the parser is somewhat is depicted in this particular diagram. Now remember that lexical analyzer does not start on its own. It would actually scan the input and return token based on the call from the parser. Okay, so parser, whenever it requires a token, it would actually make a call to the lexical analyzer by using certain function like get next token. So on parser's call, the lexical analyzer would read the source program character by character or however it wants, and then in that it will identify a particular token which was asked by the parser. So it will return that particular token to the parser. So parser, if it requires few more symbols, then it will once again call get next token. So lexical analyzer would be busy again scanning the source program and returning the token to the parser. So this is how the process is actually going to go on. And while this process is going on, there will be complete interaction with the symbol table by both the lexical analyzer as well as parser. So this is how the interaction actually takes place, right? Now, when the lexical analyzer is reading the source program, it may also perform certain other tasks. Okay, like for example, first thing is, as I mentioned, it has to identify lexemes. Okay, so once lexemes are identified, then those lexemes can be categorized as tokens and it can be returned to the parser. That is one of the major tasks. The other thing is that it can also perform activities like removing the comments and white spaces. Okay, white space in the sense, if you have left anything as blank or any new line character, any tab character, or anything that is not useful. Okay, so all those things are going to be stripped away or they're going to be removed from the input. Okay, this is also one more task that is performed by the lexical analyzer. Okay, so that is one thing. Then one more thing that the lexical analyzer can do is it can correlate error messages that are generated by the compiler. Okay, like for example, it would keep track of the number of lines that is present in your source program, and associated with that particular line, if there is any error, then along with line number, the lexical analyzer can it can put out error messages for diagnosis. Okay, this is also one more task that is done by the lexical analyzer. Then it can also make a copy of the source program with the error messages inserted in appropriate positions. Okay, so of course keep track of line numbers, and also uh, produce a copy of the program with error messages. Okay, so even macro expanded thing can also be performed by lexical analyzer. So basically there are so many tasks that are involved by lexical analyzer, right? So not only identification of token, but they can also clean your programs from unwanted things like comments or white space, etc. They can also keep track of line numbers and associated error messages with them. They can also expand macros, and they can also keep track of that information. So these are all some of the things that are performed by the lexical analyzer. So we can divide our lexical analyzer task into two major processes. Okay, so the first process, we will simply call it as scanning. Okay, so scanning means it does nothing major other than what we had specified at the top. Okay, or which we call as other tasks. Major task is to retrieve tokens, but if it is doing something else, then we are saying that it is simply scanning the program. So scanning basically comprises of tasks that do not require tokenization, such as the deletion of comment lines or comparison of compaction of consecutive white space characters into a single one line, like this. Okay, so we'll simply call it as scanning. The second process itself is called as lexical analysis, where the lexical analyzer is going to identify token and return it as an output. Okay, so these are the two major processes. Right now, one more thing that comes into picture here is why do we require lexical analysis? Yes, why do we require lexical analysis? Because a parser is the one that is actually making use of the services of lexical analysis. So why can't parser itself identify token in the input? Because parser also reads the source program. Okay, parser also reads the source program. So if parser is also doing the same thing as lexical analysis, then why can't we keep the lexical analysis part in parsing process? Okay. So of course there are certain advantages why we should keep the lexical analysis part as separate, and syntax analysis parts as separate, like spell check and grammar check. Okay, first we should do spell check and then we should do grammar check, right? So why can't we do both at the same time? So we can do it at the same time, but it would not be that efficient. So that's the reason why we keep lexical analysis part as separate, and syntax analysis parts as separate, right? So there are many reasons. One of the reason being the simplicity of the design. Okay, so if we have a separate lexical analyzer, then our design would be quite simple. Otherwise the syntax analyzer would actually become quite complex. Okay, like with lexical analysis in hand, the parser does not have to worry about handling the things like comments or white spaces or etc, because these things are very hard to write using grammar. Okay, but using regular expression, these things are very easy
Okay.
to specify. So one of the advantage of having lexical analysis is this, that whatever part is not required for the parser, that part is actually handled by the lexical analyzer, so it reduces the burden of the parser. So this is one of the advantage. So it keeps the design very simple. Okay, and the second thing is that the efficiency of the compiler would be improved if you keep a separate lexical analyzer. Okay, because specialized techniques are actually used by lexical analyzer which are not available in parser, such as buffering techniques, which can actually improve the efficiency of the compiler. Okay, so reading the program is efficient using a lexical analyzer than using a syntax analyzer. because it mixes up this specialized buffering techniques, which we are going to discuss shortly. Okay, so this is why compiler efficiency can be improved by using a lexical analyzer. The third advantage is that it can enhance the portability. Okay, like for example, since the lexical analyzer is the only one that is dealing with the source program, if there are any changes in the input, okay, or if there is any input device specific peculiarities, then it can be only restricted to lexical analyzer. Means you need to only modify the lexical analyzer, not the syntax analyzer. So everything at the beginning would be handled by the lexical analyzer itself. So therefore, portability can be improved. Okay, so if there are any changes in the input, obviously only lexical analyzer needs to be modified, and corresponding token has to be returned. Okay, so this is how the lexical analyzer brings in added advantage with compilers. Okay, now as we were talking about tokens and all, and we also came across a definition of or a word called as lexeme. This definition we need to look into. So there are three terminologies that we need to get familiarized with. Okay, so one is token, pattern, and lexeme. What exactly these things? They sound the same, but uh, actually they mean different. Okay, so let us see in detail what exactly these three things are. Okay, first of all, starting with token. So what do you mean by token, right? So token is a pair consisting of a token name and an optional attribute value. Okay, so this is what a token is. Okay, I'll explain that with an example, but this is the definition. So basically, it represents a abstract symbol of some lexical unit. Okay, so this is basically what a token is. So it's a pair consisting of name and an attribute value. It is basically an abstraction of something. Okay, abstraction of what? Abstraction of some lexical unit. Okay, so lexical unit means lexemes, right? So now let us look at pattern. What is a pattern? A pattern is a description of the form that the lexemes of a token may take. Okay, so may not be that clear. I will explain that with an example. So pattern is what? It's basically a description. So it describes how exactly a lexeme for a token is. Okay, so that is one thing. And what exactly is a lexeme? So a lexeme is a sequence of characters in the source program that matches the pattern for the token. That matches the pattern for the token. Okay, and is identified by the lexical analyzer as an instance of the token. As an instance of the token, right? So let us look at examples for each one of them. Okay, so what's a token, what's a pattern, and what's a lexeme, right? So remember the definition. Token is a pair, okay, with name and attribute. Pattern is a description. It will describe how exactly a lexeme is going to be. A lexeme is nothing but a sequence of characters, okay, that matches the pattern, right? So this is what. So let us, for example, look into this statement called as printf. Total is equal to percentage d slash n comma score. Okay. Now when I look at printf, okay, when I look at printf is a lexeme. Okay, printf is a lexeme that would actually match the pattern returned for identifier. Okay, what is the pattern for identifier? You already know it is A to Z, capital A to Z, star or something like that. So that pattern is actually matched by this printf statement. Okay, so this is the lexeme. Printf is the lexeme, right? Pattern that it matches, or the pattern that actually describes this lexeme, is A to Z, A to Z something identifier, whatever is the pattern for identifier. And what is the token identified? Token identified is ID. Okay, so this one in double quote actually matches a literal because we specify literal within double quote. Okay, similarly for score, score is obviously a name of the variable, so it matches the identifier. So this is a token identifier, this is a token identifier, but this exactly is a literal, right? So like this, there are many programming construct for which we can define pattern and the lexemes. But in some cases, the lexemes and the pattern are going to be same. Okay, like for example, the token for if. So if is a keyword, and remember that most of the time for a keyword the token is also going to be same and the pattern is also going to be same. Okay, so all of them are going to be same. So for token if, we are going to look for characters I and f. Okay, so if is present in your program, it is identified as the token. Okay, similarly else, similarly comparison operators. Okay, so all the comparison operators will have the following lexims, right? So it can have less than symbol, greater than symbol, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, so on and so forth. Okay, for id, okay, so whatever the pattern that we are supposed to specify, which is nothing but letter followed by letter or digits. Okay, so pi, score, d2, all of these things can be categorized as token id. Okay, and then number, so any numeric constant, like for example if you see this, you can say that this is a number. If you see this in your output, you can say that this is a number, right? So literal is anything that is surrounded by double quotes, like for example this. So this is how it would look in the whatever is there in this in the third column. So this is what will appear in your program. Okay, so to identify these as tokens, you require a pattern. So you need to specify patterns like this. Okay, so as I mentioned, for an identifier, the pattern. Okay, I'll just show you that. Okay, I hope I'm sharing the screen. So as I mentioned, so one of the token that is supposed to be identified is identifier. Okay, we'll call it as ID. So if this is a token, as per the definition, okay, as per the definition, this is supposed to be a pair. Okay, this is supposed to be a pair with some name of the token is identifier and some attribute value. Okay, and some attribute value. What is that attribute value? We shall look into that later. Okay, now suppose if in my program I have something like this. Okay, int total. Okay, total, right? So when I come across total, this is an identifier, correct? This is the name of the variable, by the way, right? And you know that the name of the variable is nothing but an identifier, right? Similarly, if I write one more variable, int total percentage or something like this, okay? So even this is an identifier, right? So this is the name of the variable and this is also name of the variable, but both of them are nothing but identifier. Now what is an identifier? So generally we know that an identifier is something that begins with a letter and can be followed by any number of letters or digit. Okay, so this is the definition of an identifier. So we can specify a pattern for this. Correct? We can specify a pattern for this. What is the pattern? The pattern is anything that begins with a letter. So first I will have any letter, A to Z, A to Z. Okay. Then it can be followed by any number of letters or digit. Okay. So any number of letters or digit. So I will write 0 to 9. So this can be repeated any number of times. May be there or may not be there, right? Like for example, if I write int a, so even this is an identifier, correct? Name of the variable is an identifier. So in that case, this part becomes optional, right? So that's why I will put a star here. Okay, that's why I'll put a star here. So this is the pattern. So this is the pattern that we have used to identify a variable. Okay, this is the pattern that we have used to identify a variable. So if this is a pattern and this is a token, then what exactly these are? These are nothing but lexemes. Okay, these are nothing but lexemes. Okay, I hope this is clear now. What is a lexeme? Lexeme is something that appears in your program, source program, which you are going to group together. Like for example, okay, this is matching this pattern, continue. This is matching this pattern, continue. Okay, I have a letter followed by letter, okay, followed by another letter, followed by another letter, followed by another letter. So we are grouping them together until what? Until I come across this semicolon. So semicolon is not a part of this definition. So we will stop here. So we know that this actually matches this particular pattern. So we may call this as an identifier and we can return it as a token. So when we are returning it as a token, we will return it as a pair. Okay. Pair means we have two things. So one thing is we have the name of the identity, name of the token, and we will have an optional attribute value. Now, what is this attribute value? It would depend. Okay, like for example, for an identifier, you can actually keep the symbol table entry. Okay, so you will enter this identifier into the symbol table, correct? So you will keep the symbol table entry to look into that particular identifier whenever you want. Okay, so for a number, for example, if it is a number, right? So you will simply write its value. For example, 3. Okay, so maybe 3 is appearing in your program. So write it as 3, right? So like this, an token can have some attribute value. Okay, I hope now this is clear. What is a token? What is a lexeme? And what is a pattern? Right? Okay. So some examples have been given. So for keyword, most of the time, as I said, the keyword is going to be the same. The pattern is going to be the same. The lexeme is going to be the same. Of course, the token that might be returned is called as keyword. Okay, I'll just show you that as an example. Okay, like you have if. To match if, what is required? What is the pattern that I'm looking for? Like this is similar to get your name or to identify your name. What is the pattern that I'm supposed to write? Your name only. Okay, like for that, for every keyword, the pattern is going to be the same, and what you're looking for in the source program is also going to be the same. Okay, token that is written for that may be something like this keyword. Okay, with the values. Your value in the sense it does not have any value, but it can be returned as a keyword, right? So like this, you can identify or write patterns, lexemes, and tokens separately. Okay, now when it comes to attributes for tokens, as I mentioned, every attribute, every token should have some attribute. So what are those attributes are going to be? Like as I said, for number matches both 0 and 1, it will be like any number if you have, the value is going to be the same. Okay, I think I'll show you some example. Okay, like for example, check this out. We have a statement called as E is equal to mc square. Okay, so this is the exponent operation that is used in Fortran language. So what are all the tokens that are returned by this statement? Okay, that is one thing that we need to look into. So E, what is E? E is an identifier, correct? So it will generate this particular token. So what token it will generate? It will generate ID followed by a pointer to the symbol table for entry E. So E will be entered into the symbol table. So wherever it is, so that pointer is going to be associated with the token. Okay. Then we have got equal to assignment operator. So for an assignment operator, as I said, the operator is common, right? So the pattern for it and the lexeme for it is one and the same. So we are also not going to store that in the symbol table. So we will simply pass on that. We have seen an assignment operator. Then comes M, once again an identifier. So we pass ID or we generate a token ID and a pointer to the symbol table. Then the operator star is there, so which is nothing but the multiplication operator. Then C is there. So for that, this will be produced as a token. And then we have this exponent operator. So we'll just simply return that we have seen an exponent operator. And finally 2, right? So which is a number. So we'll return that we have seen a number and the value of that number, okay, which is nothing but 2, right? So like this, attribute values are going to be generated and returned by the lexical analyzer. Okay, And when we are saying that it will simply pass on an entry into the symbol table, pointer to an entry into the symbol table. So why this is important is because the symbol table would actually keep track of all the information. Okay, like for example, if it is an identifier, its type, its length, okay, and the location or the address assigned to that particular variable or the token. So all those things are going to be maintained in the symbol table. So passing that information would be essential for the next phase, which is syntax analyzer, to make further changes. Right. So this is how the lexicon analyzer is going to pass on tokens to our syntax analyzer. Okay. Now there is one more part that we discussed about, which is how lexicon analyzer is going to handle the different types of errors, because it's also some of the side tasks that is performed by our lexicon analyzer. So we shall see what type of errors the lexicon analyzer can come across, and if it comes across any error, then what is the effect and what exactly the lexicon analyzer does in order to overcome that particular problem. Okay, now there are certain errors which may be quite common, but there are certain errors which can actually be challenging for the lexicon analyzer. Like for example, observe this statement. It says fi, then there is opening bracket, then there is a is equal to f of x. Okay, and then let us assume that it continues, right? Now what is this fi? Okay, so is this an function? Okay, is this a function, or is this a if statement that has been misspelled as fi? That's the question. Okay, so obviously if it is a misspelling, then we know that this has to be corrected. This is an error, right? So basically this is an error. If it is a function, then obviously this is not an error. So this type of cases needs to be handled by our lexicon analyzer, right? But there are certain situations when the lexicon analyzer is unable to proceed. Okay, like if it is having continuous or series sequence of errors or a series of errors, then our lexicon analyzer may not be able to continue. Or if it does not know what exactly to do with a particular character or an input, then what happens is our lexicon analyzer would not be able to scan or give back the token to the syntax analyzer, right? So in those cases, the lexicon analyzer has to recover and it has to produce tokens for our syntax analyzer. Okay, so how exactly it is going to do that? So in some situations when the lexicon analyzer is unable to proceed because of some pattern not being matched, or it is not matching any prefix of the remaining input, then in that case, okay, then in that case, we will basically follow a recovery strategy called as a panic mode recovery. Okay, panic mode recovery, right? So as the name itself indicates, see the lexicon analyzer is in panic. See, its job is to identify lexemes and return them as token. But right now, maybe because of some error, like for example, this situation, it is unable to process the input. Okay, or it is not able to determine what exactly this lexeme is or what token it is supposed to return. So now it is in panic because parser is continuously asking for token, right? So it is unable to return the token, so it is under pressure. So now it is under panic. So under panic, what is supposed to happen, right? So normally, if you are panicking, obviously, what you are going to do? So will you be able to do the things that you did normally? No, you cannot, right? So this is also what the lexicon analyzer actually follows. So under panic mode recovery, what we do is we simply skip the input until we come across a known lexeme or a known token, right? So this is what the lexicon analyzer does. So we basically delete. When we are skipping the input, it's nothing but deleting the input. So we will simply delete the successive characters from the remaining input until the lexicon analyzer can find a well-formed token at the beginning of what input is left. Okay, this is what panic mode recovery is, right? Now, of course, this is not going to help the parser because it was expecting tokens from it. But of course, this will keep our lexical analyzer running. Okay, otherwise it would be stuck and it would not be able to serve the parser just because of maybe some error. Okay, I'll just explain you with an example what exactly it means. Like for example, let us assume that we have a statement, something like this. Okay, we have a line that has to be scanned by the lexical analyzer and it is terminated by a semicolon, right? So somewhere here an error has occurred. Okay, the lexical analyzer was scanning the input and it came across something which it does not understand. Okay, so now it cannot return the token that was expected by the syntax analyzer. So now it is in panic. Okay, so now it is in panic. So what it does is it will see the next input. Okay, so it will if it also does not give it solution, it will simply delete, or in other words it will simply skip on the remaining characters or remaining input until it comes across a known lexeme. Okay, like for example, we know that semicolon usually ends the line. Okay, so this particular line completely is going to be eliminated or discarded, and now it will go to the next line to return the token. Maybe next line may not contain any error. Okay, in that hope it will skip this particular input and it will return to the next line in order to scan. So this is what has been mentioned here, right? So what it does, it will delete the successive characters from the remaining input until the lexical analyzer can find a well formed token. Normally this well formed token would be some delimiter that is used by most of the program. Okay, like for example, if it is a function, okay, if it is a statement, then semicolon is a delimiter. We know that after this statement, after this particular character, this statement is going to end. Okay, if it is a function, what is a delimiter? We have opening bracket and closing bracket, right? So like this, there are certain delimiters. Okay, if it is an expression, if we have an opening bracket, okay, so we can simply, and if we do not get what it is specifying, then we can simply skip until I come across a closing bracket. So like this, there are going to be delimiters which are known to the lexical analyzer, which it can use to simply skip the input in case of errors, right? So this type of recovery is called as a panic mode recovery. Okay, so this is called as panic mode recovery, right? Now other type of recovery is also possible. Simply skipping the input, what it would do is basically it becomes lexical analyzer job becomes easier, but we are actually not correcting the program. Okay, or we are not diagnosing the problem, we are simply skipping over the problem, right? Or we are escaping from the problem. So however, if you don't want to escape, then there are other possible error recovery strategies, right? So there are certain modifications that the lexical analyzer can actually perform in order to uh, correct the errors. Okay, like some of the error recovery actions that are taken by lexical analyzer as follows. One is it can delete one character from the remaining input. Suppose if that makes any sense and lets it identify. Like for example, let us assume that we have defined that the identifier should be something like this. Okay, A to Z, 0 to 9 star. I write this as the definition. Okay, in the input, lexical analyzer has actually seen ABC and then dollar. Let us assume that maybe because of some typo, we have introduced dollar. Okay, so now lexical analyzer scans A. It is as per this pattern. Okay, it thinks that okay, this may be an identifier. Then it scans B. Once again, it knows that it is an identifier, and scan C, once again a part of the same definition. But then it reads dollar. Okay, obviously dollar is not a part of the definition. Okay, so it doesn't know what to do now. So it is in error now. It is in error state now because none of the definition matches. But it knows that previously it has matched a long lexeme, and maybe this might be an error. So what it can do is it can simply delete this particular character to return this value as a token. Okay, of course, sometimes it may be right or sometimes it may be wrong. but this is one of the option that is present. So it can delete one character, only one character. Okay, it can't do that more, because if we give that luxury to our Lexer, then it can delete whenever it finds some error, it can delete the entire program also. Okay, or maybe majority part of the program. So we will not allow that. We will only allow deletion of one character from the remaining input if it is possible for us to recover from that error. Okay, so it can also insert, instead of deleting, it can also insert a missing character into the remaining input. That can also be done. Okay, so known characters can be introduced. So replace a character by another character can also be done, and transpose two adjacent characters can also be done. Now this can be done for errors like this. Like for example, fi, if this is an if statement, then obviously it is supposed to be transposed, right? So this can also be done by the lexical analyzer. So these are some of the error recovery actions that are taken by the lexical analyzer. But of course, as I said, you need to be careful when you are using these error recovery strategies, because as I said, deleting a character may or may not make any sense. Okay. Similarly, inserting a character may or may not make any sense. Similarly, replacing also and transposing also. So be very careful when you are using this particular strategy. But in, to do all of these things, you need to make your Lexer program more complex, and that would actually increase the expense of the lexical analyzer program. So obviously, the better adopted strategy is the panic mode recovery strategy. Okay, so that is one of the things, right? Uh, Now, as we were talking about the uh, lexical analyzer and syntax analyzer, and why syntax analyzer is kept separate from lexical analysis, we talked about one advantage, that is the efficiency is increased, right? So why efficiency is increased by using lexical analyzer? That is one thing. Efficiency is increased because the syntax analyzer does not have to deal with remaining part of the program which are unnecessary, like white spaces or comment lines or something like that. That is one thing. The other thing that we mentioned was that the lexical analyzer has its own buffering techniques that actually improves the efficiency of efficiency of the lexical analyzer, and hence the compiler, right? Now, what is this buffering technique? Right. So let us have a look into that. What do you mean by this buffering technique, and how this buffering technique can actually enhance the performance of the lexical analyzer? Right. Now, remember that the lexical analyzer actually scans the input character by character. Right. So obviously, to read an input character by character, you need to make a function call. You need to make a function call, right? So remember that there is a function call that is involved to read a character, to read one character. Okay. So you will, like for example, let us assume that we have a function called as read, and it will read a character. So read, right? So we'll make a call with the, okay, I will also specify what is the input device. Okay, so what is the input device, and from where that character has to be read. Okay, in our assembly level language, we did this by using RD input, correct? If you remember, we did this by using RD. RD stands for read from the device, and the name of the device has to be specified. So it will read one character from that particular device and it will give it. Okay, if we talk about this only, then to read one character, we had to make one system call, right? So your source program can contain how many characters, correct? It can contain thousands of characters, or even more than thousands, even millions. So we are talking about millions of lines of code in a program. Okay, so we have got millions of lines of code. So in a line, how many characters can be there, right? So just imagine if I use this strategy to read one character at a time, how much time it would take to read your entire source program, right? So obviously this is inefficient, correct? So this is very inefficient, right? So if I'm keep on reading one character at a time, to read a source program that contains millions of code, it would actually take more time. So how do we enhance, or how do we improve? right? How do we reduce this particular time? So to reduce the time, what lexical analyzer does is it actually makes use of certain buffering techniques, okay, or it makes use of buffers. Okay, it actually makes use of buffers, right? So these buffers are of length n. Okay, n can be the size of the disk block. Normally the size of the disk block is about 4096. Okay, so this can be the size of this buffer, and at a time, instead of reading one character at a time, you can read n characters, or you can fill up this particular buffer. Okay, you can completely fill up this particular buffer, right? So with one system call, instead of reading one character, with the system call now, let us assume read buffer or something like this, read into buffer with the program or input device, what we can do is we can fill up this entire buffer. Okay, so all the characters would be present here only, so that would actually avoid us reading from the device again and again. Okay, so this is how the buffering techniques are actually used. Okay, now this input buffering is adopted in a different way in our lexical analyzer. Okay, so it actually makes use of a technique called as double buffering scheme. Double buffering means we have two buffer instead of one. See, having a buffer itself will improve the efficiency because we are reading almost n or the size of the buffer number of characters. But now we are having double buffering technique, right? So instead of one buffer, we have double the buffer, okay, or it is of size 2n now, right? So how exactly this input buffering technique works, and how it improves the speed, and what is the variation of this input buffering scheme that can be adopted in our lexical analyzer, that's what we are going to look into. Okay, so let us just start with identifying what exactly is this input buffering scheme, right? So as I said, we are using buffer pairs, which is obviously two buffers at the same time. So because of the amount of time taken to process the characters, as I mentioned, and the large number of characters that must be processed during the compilation of a large source program, we actually make use of a specialized buffering technique to reduce the amount of overhead required to process a single input character. So that's what I said. So if you are reading only one character at a time, and it becomes very large, or it becomes much of an overhead in order to process the entire program, because your program may contain millions of code. Okay, so millions and lines of code, right? So therefore, to improve this, we involve a technique of two buffers which are alternately reloaded. Okay, it might look something like this, right? So the first part here, this is one buffer of size n, and the second part here, this is another buffer of size n. Okay, so totally how much? Totally size is 2n, and each buffer size is around 4096 bytes. So instead of having a single command to read one character, we use a read command that can read n characters into the buffer. So this is one of the change, right? So instead of one character, we are reading n characters into the buffer by using certain system commands. If the program does not contain n character, then whatever is read, okay, is going to be filled in into the buffer. And if it is the end of the program, then obviously that end of the program is going to be indicated with a special character called as EOF. Okay, so this is how the program is going to be read. Now to identify the lexeme using this buffering technique, we need two pointers. Okay, one of the pointer is called as lexeme begin, the other pointer is called as forward. Okay, what do you mean by lexeme begin? So this pointer, as the name itself indicates or points to the beginning of the current lexeme that we are trying to determine. Okay, the second thing is forward, which would scan and look ahead for until a pattern is found. Okay, so this is what two pointers that are maintained. Now how we identify, we simply start with placing lexeme begin at the beginning of the source program, and we improve or increment the value of the forward pointer. So as soon as a forward comes across something that does not match, okay, we may assume that whatever we have seen so far between lexeme begin and forward as one of the pattern, or as one of the lexeme and we can identify that as a token, right? So once we determine that particular lexeme, then forward is going to be set to the character at its right end. Okay, and then after the lexeme is recorded as an attribute value of the token, then lexeme begin is set to the character immediately after the lexeme just formed. Okay, so like this we are going to make use of these two pointers to identify the lexeme, right? Now I'll just show you that with an example. Okay, assume that we have A, B, C, D, and something like this. Okay, so semicolon, something like this. Okay, int ABCD, all right. Okay, so our lecture knows that okay, it has to return keyword for the, it has to return token, right? So it has to return keyword for the first one, and for the second one it has to return identifier. Okay, now what is the pattern for keyword? Normally the pattern for keyword is keyword itself, int. Okay, what is the pattern for identifier? The pattern for identifier is what we have assumed so far. It is A to Z and then followed by A to Z 0 to 9 star. Okay, I'm just writing it briefly here, but you know what is the pattern, right? So Lexicon Analyzer knows this pattern, and when it identifies this pattern, it will return this particular token. Okay, so now to identify what lexeme are there, it needs two pointers. So first pointer is lexeme begin. Okay, the second pointer is forward. Second pointer is forward, right? So initially we will begin with this lexeme begin and lexeme forward are as usual here. So I has been seen. So I actually matches something here. It can also match this, or it can also match this, because even in identifier we can actually have I, right? So then we will increment forward. Okay, when I increment forward by 1, so obviously it will also match both. So we'll increment again. So forward is incremented to here. Okay, once again we have this match and this match, right? But we know that this is the first rule that we have written. So int will be matched. So of course after that we need to also check. So then we increment forward. So now forward points to a space which is not a part of any definition here. So what Lexer is going to think is, whatever I had seen so far, maybe that is a lexeme. Okay, whatever I had seen so far means from lexeme begin to forward right now. Okay, whatever we have seen, which is this part, right? So this can be identified as a lexeme. Okay, if this is a lexeme, it has to match some pattern, correct? Which pattern it is matching? It is matching this pattern. Okay, even though this one also matches, this is written first. Okay, if you remember the rule of Lexer, right? So whichever rule has been written first, that is going to be matched, right? And this is going to be identified as a keyword, right? So once it is identified as a keyword, now we have to continue the process, correct? We shouldn't stop. We should identify. See, we have identified one lexeme here and return one token. So now we have to identify other tokens as well. So what will be done is, so what will be done? So forward is going to be set to the character at its right end. So forward is right now pointing to this space, right? So it will be pointing to here. Similarly, lexeme begin will be moved ahead. Okay, similarly, lexeme begin will be moved ahead to the last place where our lexeme was identified. Okay, now you can observe we are pointing to space. So after space, there is A. So obviously, there is nothing that matches. So this is basically a space. So if we have a rule like for space itself, right? So this is what is currently being matched, right? So our Lexer might return that there is a space that is present in between. So what it has returned? First it has returned keyword, okay, then it has returned a space, then it has returned a space which is required, correct? It is required to separate the keyword from, or the data type from the variable, right? So after this what will happen? So lexeme forward will be incremented, correct, to the next character. Lexeme begin will be incremented by one place to the last place where it was identifying the lexeme, right? So now we have LB here, then we have forward here. So matching the definition, this one also matches, this one also matches. No, no, sorry, this one doesn't match because it is A. Obviously, we are going with identifier. Until what? Until we come across semicolon, which is not a part of any definition. Okay, so this will return identifier, and then finally we have a semicolon. Okay, I'll write it as SC. Right. So these are the set of tokens that will be returned by our lexical analyzer using the lexeme begin and the forward pointer. Right. Now, when our lexical analyzer is actually doing the same or advancing the pointer, okay, it can reach the end of the buffer. Okay, it can reach the end of the, see, we are talking about buffering scheme, right? So we have loaded enough character or n number of characters into a buffer, but at some point of time we may reach the end of the buffer. We may reach the end of the buffer. So since we are using a double buffering technique, we are supposed to load the second buffer as we come across the end of the first buffer. Okay, so constantly we have to do two things here. One thing is, of course, we are supposed to determine the lexeme by incrementing the forward pointer. The second thing is we have to always check the end of the buffer. We have to check for end of the buffer. As soon as end of the buffer occurs, we have to load the second buffer. Okay, and as we are scanning the second buffer, if I come across the end of the second buffer, I have to reload the first buffer. Okay, I have to reload the first buffer, right? Until and unless that happens, I will not overwrite the characters that have been read. So they will remain in the input. They will remain in the input for more number of times. This is also one more advantage of using the double buffering technique. Okay, so when we advance the forward, we require to perform two tests. Okay, first test is whether we have reached the end of the buffer. Okay, and if we have done so, then we are going to reload the other buffer from the input, right? And forward would be pointed to the beginning of the newly loaded buffer. So these are the two things that we are doing. One thing is we are determining the lexer, and second thing is we are also checking whether to reload our buffer or not. Okay, so this is what the strategy that is usually followed, right? But whatever strategy is followed, that can be improved by using a concept called as sentinels. Okay, so if we use the scheme above, whatever we have mentioned, as I said, we must check for two things. One thing is each time we advance the forward, we have to check that we have not moved off one of the buffer, and if yes, then we have to reload it. And for each character that we are read, we are making two tests. One of them is for the end of the buffer, and another one is to determine what character has been read or what is the lexeme that is currently being considered. Okay, so obviously these two things can be combined together into a multi-way branching. So what we do is to see, since we are reading a character or from the buffer, we will consider the end of the buffer also as a special character. Okay, and that special character is called as a sentinel. So what's a sentinel? A sentinel is a special character that is used in order to uh, determine the end of the buffer. Okay, and this is obviously not going to be a part of any source program. So obviously one of the natural choice is going to be the character EOF. So EOF indicates two things. One thing is it indicates the end of the file, which is your source program. The second thing is it will also indicate the end of the buffer. So when I come across this EOF, it can mean two things. Okay, one is obviously I have read enough characters to reach the end of the buffer, or else I have read enough characters to reach the end of the file, right? So it would look something like this with the modification. I believe diagram is there. Yeah, it will look something like this, as you can observe. So now we have introduced a EOF into the buffer itself. So as we are reading the character, okay, as we enhance forward, we will check whether we have come across EOF. Okay, that would be the buffer check, end of the buffer check. So if it is so, we will load the buffer, right? Now remember that the input can end midway also. So in that case, obviously the lexical analysis process is over. But if we come across the end of the buffer, then once again we have to reload the first buffer. So the same concept is used, but this time instead of doing two checks, we are restricting it to a simple multi-way branching. Okay, it would look something like this. Okay, I hope you are able to see this code. So it's a multi-way branch, right? So we're using a switch statement. So as I'm incrementing the forward, okay, star forward, dereference the pointer and check what character you are currently looking at. Okay, so if you are looking at EOF, which is in this case here, right? So if you have come across this, so as I increment the forward pointer, if I come across EOF, what is it that I'm supposed to do? I have to check whether I am at the end of the first buffer or the second buffer, right? So if forward is at the end of the first buffer, what I have to do? Reload the second buffer and move the forward to the beginning of the second buffer. Okay. Second case might be I have come across EOF here. Okay. So if I come across EOF here, then I am at the end of the second buffer. So forward is at the end of the second buffer. So what we are supposed to do? Reload the first buffer and move the forward pointer to the beginning. So it's something like going on circular, right? So we read character, we load the buffer, okay, we move around from one buffer one to buffer two, etc. Now what if this is the case? We have reached the end of the, we have not read up to the end, we have reached the end of the file. So if it is end of the file, obviously it's the end of the input. So you are going to end the lexical analysis. Okay. So if it is not EOF, then obviously it is some character that has been read. Correct? It may be this, or it may be this, or it may be this, so on and so forth. So write the cases for all the other characters. Got it? So like this, using a simple switch case multi-way branching, we can actually improve the performance of this input buffering technique even more by introducing the concept of sentience. Okay, so this is what the input buffering technique is, and this is how it enhances the speed of the lexical analysis phase, right? We have to discuss about other things. I think time's up. I'll discuss about that in the next session. So just wait for a few minutes. I'll take the attendance. If you have any doubts, then you can ask. Okay, taken the attendance. Okay, so we'll see you in the next session. If you don't have any doubts, then see you in the next session. Okay. Thank you, students.